Okay, I'd like to welcome you to the St. Albans Town Select Board meeting. We started our meeting at 5:30. We went into executive session, and we'll now reconvene our regular meeting. And the first thing we'll do is ask you to join us in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Has everyone seen the agenda?
Yep.
Are there any motions to amend the agenda?
Just move ahead.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. We have a warrant. Bennett, you have the general warrant?
Yeah, I have the general warrant for a total of $48,744.83. It looks like our biggest expenditures out of that were a few different tickets for Cargill for salt.
A little bit of salt.
Yeah, that's what snow amounts to.
A lot of salt.
And we had a little under $9,300 to night engineering for the exploratory phase of our dock renovation. So I'll make a motion that we approve it.
Motion's been made. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Bill, you have the general warrants and the payroll?
I have payroll, yeah. I have two, excuse me, two payroll warrants. The first is for the period December 11th to 17th in the amount of $18,739.64. The second is for the period December 18th to December 24th in the amount of $32,700.61. I move that these warrants be approved.
Motion's been made. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have the minutes. What's the date of those minutes? I don't have those in front of me.
December 18th.
December 18th?
And that's it.
So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of December 18th.
So moved.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. We have Corey Parent, Carolyn Brannigan, and new senator, or old senator, I guess, Randy Brock. Congratulations, Randy. Would you like to come up and address the board?
Start
right away.
First of all, thanks for having us. Just introduce myself. I'm Corey Parent. I represent St. Albans City and 1/3 of St. Albans Town in the House of Representatives. I'm the ranking member on the Energy and Technology Committee. Just for a quick highlight of what we're probably going to be taking up this year, we actually spent some time in the fall down in Montpelier talking about FirstNet, which is a federal safety program after 9/11 to build emergency first responder build out, and it looks like the governor is opting in on that, not an opt-out, which I think makes sense for us. Just briefly, we don't have to go it alone. Some folks wanted us to opt out, design all of this program as a state, but we saw how that worked out with Health Connect, and we figured an opt-in's a safer route to go. Biggest news probably in our community coming up is going to be the carbon tax. We've already had the Essex Plan folks up trying to convince me to take up time in our committee on the carbon tax, so I expect that to take up a healthy amount of our time this session, along with some of the stuff oversight of the new Agency of Digital Services. And I'll pass over to our new senator, Randy Brock.
Well, let me give it to Carolyn first. Let me finish up.
We are all delighted, Mr. Chair, to have Randy on our team. He's not a newcomer to us by any means, so we're very, very pleased that he's been appointed to this. So I do have things to report. I've been busy through the summer and fall working with the farmers, and especially regarding water. We, as you know, appropriated $54 million last May with our fiscal 18 budget, so that was available the 1st of July in 2017, and we're halfway through that fiscal year now. One of the things we intend to do this week is review the work that was promised to us that would be done, and we're cautiously optimistic, I guess is what I would say, that they are making progress. I know we heard from the commissioner, one of the commissioners in the agency of clean water. I don't know what the name of the agency is. It's environmental conservation. They promised us that they would be able to get some work done, but on the way out the door in May said, we really don't have enough people to put $54 million to work. That's a lot of money, as you all know. And they were a little hesitant about really wanting to commit that they could get the work done. So we'll see how they did. There's, as you know, been a lot of concern about Lake Carmi. It doesn't really have anything to do with St. Albans town, but there are a lot of farms in Franklin and farms here too. So we're all going to be working on that. I have been assigned, my morning committee still is the Agriculture Committee. Senator Bobby Starr is the chair of that committee. I enjoy it very much, and I feel that this term, this session, we are powerful, perhaps more powerful than the committee's been for a couple of years. We have a full contingent on the committee and people who are interested in getting down to work. In the afternoon, I was on institutions. I asked to be taken off institutions because, the truth is, the Senate Institutions Committee, when they get the Capitol bill, which is really the only piece of legislation that passes out of that committee, when they receive it, the House has spent already most of the session working on it. We don't have anything to work on until we get the Capitol bill from the House. They do such a good job, interview everybody, put the numbers together, talk with the governor. So when we get it in the Senate, it's pretty much just a rubber stamp. And I want things to do. So I asked to be taken off that committee and placed on the Education Committee. And I was a school teacher when I first got out of college, and for the first few years that I was married, then I served on the school board in Georgia and on the supervisory union board also. So I feel like I know a lot about that. And then on Ways and Means, I dealt a lot with school taxes, the tax rate, the homestead and non-resident tax. So I'm very much looking forward to that committee, and I hope that I can do something sensible there regarding the tax rate. Having said all that, Carrie and I see each other occasionally in town, and bumped into each other at the hospital about a month ago, and she mentioned about this salt problem. And so typically when the bids go out from the state to buy salt in the late spring, they try to make sure that there's enough room in the bid for towns also to buy enough salt for their needs at that same rate that the state pays, and that didn't happen this year. So I called the Agency of Transportation, and they assured me, oh yeah, it did. And then they looked at their paperwork, and what happened was the people who respond to these bids have the option on the response sheet of agreeing to sell to the towns or not agreeing to sell to the towns. One person who sent the bid back agreed to sell to the towns, the other two did not. So apparently, I know, and I asked the guys in Georgia too. Ricky Nye is still head of highways in town, and they found the same problem. So they were buying, as Carrie told me, you guys were salt independently. So we'll try to get that straightened out another year. I think the problem came from a new administration, some new people coming in at the upper levels, especially in the Agency of Transportation. They don't see this as a big problem, but of course in the towns, if you've got your budget approved,
Well, I mean, the problem was that our salt is now a lot more expensive, so I'm sure they wouldn't see that as a problem on their end, but on our budget, we had to raise our budget.
Georgia said the same thing,
Yeah.
that it's an increase in cost.
Yep.
So I'll try to follow that through, because the bids will be going out again in May.
Thank you.
I could go on and on, but I guess I'll stop.
Can you make it a condition of the bid that they do sell to the towns?
That could happen, yes.
The way you mentioned it was optional. That is conditioned, they must sell.
That could be done in the contract. I'm not sure the secretary or the governor want to do that, but I'll mention it to them.
Out of curiosity, why would they not want to do something to help the local communities?
I don't know. Nobody wanted to answer that question. I can speculate. Maybe they thought they wouldn't be able to get it. I don't know. There have been some years when salt's been in short supply, but in fact, I think that's why the bids went out early this year, because they were fearful that salt would be in short supply, so they wanted to get it wrapped up. But now that I know that this has been a problem, I can follow through on it, and I
Well,
will.
And part two of my concern was that we were unaware of it. So
Yes.
if that goes out, either way, I'd really love to know in the summertime whether or not we're going to be on our own.
And they
for the
said
salt
that they were
prices.
not aware that the towns received any information on what came back from those bids.
And they might not be if they're, like Bill said, if that option is on the sheet. I just would like to know.
I'll make sure that happens. Thank you.
All seen, I'm sure, the movies in which a guy gets hit on the head and goes into a coma and doesn't wake up for 4 years. Well, that's what it's like coming back to the Senate, because all the problems that were there 4 years ago are there today. You know, the affordability problem, that Vermont has become too expensive a place to live for many, many people. The budget gap, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars spending higher than the amount that we're taking in year after year after year. The issue of the lake. How do we clean up the lake, and where do we get the money to do it? And on and on and on. And virtually every one of those problems is no different than it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And the real test for this legislature is going to be whether or not we actually do something about many of these intractable problems instead of interminably talking about them. And that's going to be a challenge. And yes, there are some new problems. Certainly what's happened on the federal level. And what is likely to happen in terms of an increased scarcity of monies coming to the states, and the states having to figure out, well, do we make up that money somehow through some mystical way that nobody seems to understand how, or do we say that maybe there's some things that we can't afford to do because we're so dependent on a third or more of our revenue, if not more than that, from the federal government, and things are getting tight. And then we look at things that are unanticipated and really yet haven't been thought through, like the effect of the new federal tax bill. The tax bill that would do things like, for upper-end housing, make it more expensive to own because the deduction is limited on what you can deduct, plus the state and local tax deduction that was a big part of that for high-tax states like Vermont is going away. And we'd have to put our head in the sand to think that that isn't going to have an effect on Vermont. And the concern that I have is going to depress the value of higher-end property, which directly affects whether or not people buy it, whether or not it can maintain its value, and whether people who are upper-income taxpayers decide to decamp from Vermont and go someplace else. And we have to be very, very sensitive to that, because those are the people who are not income sensitized. And when you look at money coming in for local purposes, that's a cash cow for us. So the issue of what can we do creatively to deal with stuff like that's going to be a challenge that I don't think this legislature has even thought about, because it wasn't entirely on the radar when the legislature adjourned earlier this year. So those are some of the challenges. I don't know what committees that I'm on. I'll know tomorrow when the secret box is opened up. I'm expecting to probably be on solid waste in the morning and on ancient roads in the afternoon, but we'll see.
One of the critical areas, and I'll actually give you guys a compliment, as a St. Albans town taxpayer, we're one of the few communities that saw our taxes go down this year with Act 46 and the good work you guys did here on the select board. I know some of my city constituents called and said, I thought you guys were saving us tax dollars with this teacher thing, and saw theirs go up, and I go, your state proportion of that's down, it's the local tax part that's up. So I do want to recognize the good work that you guys do. We hear from our constituents, especially in St. Albans town, the affordability crisis and keeping taxes low. I appreciate it, and my neighbors on Potter Avenue appreciate it, and I know the three of us here are going to work hard with the governor's team to make sure we don't see that 9-cent increase come into effect this year, which has been projected for the Ed Fund.
I would wish the state, particularly in education, take an approach where they have to raise enough money to cover the anticipated expenses, unlike the way it's done now. the town, we do our budget, we watch things very, very, very carefully. And the tax, total tax, and therefore the rate is cost-based. Unfortunately, so many of the state programs are income-based. For example, and it always bugs me about the state education tax. Somebody decides we need to raise a pool of money without determining a cost basis to calculate precisely what is going to be needed to give folks an adequate or even a good education. So you have this pile of money that has to be spent. And I maintain that if the authorities that be calculated precisely what it costs to educate a child at various and sundry levels, you come at a per pupil cost. And that is all that school districts would be reimbursed for, is the cost per pupil. If they wish to spend beyond that, Bianchi or the other laws notwithstanding, they have to go to the taxpayer for any cent they want above that state-mandated amount. And I think you'd find there's a heck of a different cost structure to look at. And that's my old soapbox on that thing. So in 4 years, that hasn't changed either, Randy.
In 25 years.
Right. Right.
Yeah. What about you guys? Are there any local issues besides the salt that you'd like to see us address while we're down there?
I think we still have to talk about stormwater permits and A&R and how that's been a debacle that's left 70 or so permittees in our town without an active stormwater permit, because that runs into, we can't take a road over if it's associated with a stormwater permit that's not valid and active.
Get them updated.
Is that was part of the problem up on? There's a lot. I can't think of the road right now. Not a layer, but
It is that one.
there's a few up in my district that when I go door to door, it seems to be the biggest
The
issue.
one near you, though, that's not the issue on that.
Okay.
But there's,
That's a work in progress.
it's just-
That was part of it, though.
The whole concept of Act 250 needs to be really brushed off and sharpened to encourage and attract people rather than to be a deterrent.
I agree. I think you're speaking to the choir here. See, I think
yeah,
Franklin
okay, but
County has
you
the
gotta
best
make the noise
delegation in the state, but we're outnumbered down there,
Are
unfortunately.
we getting a report on Act 250 when we get back?
Yes.
There was supposed to be a committee to review that whole thing
Yeah.
and
there's
make
a-
recommendations for change.
Yep, and I know the governor's office worked on it a few weeks ago just because it was in the news.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know they're looking to get that out to us soon.
Well, I know as a small business, we're also concerned that the legislature wades into any personnel policy law. I don't think that you should be. I'm just going to put that out. That's just me. It's not the select board speaking, but I don't, paid leave, paid sick leave. I feel like we are generous with our personnel policy, and I don't really think that we need somebody else telling us what we should have in our personnel policy.
local control is very important to our town.
So paid family leave, I think, might be considered, and I feel pretty strongly, at least a vote of one, that I'd like to have control over that ourselves. There might be questions in the audience, I don't know.
As far as Act 250, the last thing they did was that 9L criteria, which does not work for St. Albans Town and many other communities around the state. We just don't qualify for the growth program that they envision. We don't have a true downtown. We can't be designated as a village, and so, but we have a lot of growth. We have growth near our exits, and they've raised the bar for growth in the town, and trying to drive it into the city or into urban areas. The problem is that it doesn't really work that way. You end up with no growth. You end up with, businesses that just don't come into our area. They may go in Chittenden County, but they don't come to Franklin County. And St. Albans Town doesn't qualify. And so that law, that change in Act 250 is very detrimental to our community. And I don't think it serves the existing downtowns, because you can't make business go where business doesn't want to go.
Right.
And so we end up, both communities lose on that front.
Well, a prime example is, I talked to the Luno family. They wouldn't have been able to build their dealership where it is now under 9L. That's a perfect spot for an auto dealership up at the other exit in town. And, I sat on Commerce and Economic Development my first term in the House, and I brought that up because that was one of the biggest issues I heard at the time. And unfortunately, the majority of the folks on the committee at the time goes, well, that's exactly what we designed it to do, to drive the business into downtown. So, we hear you loud and clear and we'll continue to push, but unfortunately, there's still the folks in Burlington and other parts of the state that enjoy, think 9L is doing its job. And I think these guys would probably have a pretty tough time in the Senate getting it through Senator Bray's committee to make that change. But I know we've had buy-in, a lot of folks, and there's a lot of moderate folks across the aisle that agree that there needs to be a change there, but and the governor does as well.
It should be modified so that it works for all communities, so that you're not really keeping one community down to benefit the other. And unfortunately, I don't believe it really benefits the community that they intend to, because like in our case with St. Albans City, certain businesses will locate there and others won't. And you're not going to get the business that locate in the town locate in the city. So what you end up with, no business. And that doesn't help anybody, because the more business you have, the better the community is, better the economic community is. So that's been a problem. So the other thing is that I'm glad to hear Carolyn talk about money that is geared towards stormwater or clean water, and working with the farmers, because there's 60 or 70% of the runoff is agriculturally based, and that's putting the money where the problem is. And I think all the farmers are very willing to work and to. I mean, they don't have the resources to do it on their own, but working with the state, we can do a lot. I think, to me, it's money much more spent than it is to go into a subdivision or a more urban area and putting in these detention ponds and retention ponds and things that's envisioned that are millions of dollars to do, where the runoff that's coming from the fields by the nature of their business is really, if it's 60-70% of the problems. If we could cure 60 or 70% of the problem, we'd be doing pretty well.
Well, they've made huge improvements here in the Bay. I think it was the Montang farm got sold recently,
Yep.
And the new owner worked with the Agency of Natural Resources over a couple of years, and they were measuring the amount of phosphorus flowing off into the bay. And this year, they recorded huge improvement, so that would be reduction in the amount of phosphorus.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly which pastures it was, but pastures that ended up having the water run down right directly in the bay, making it easy to measure. So the farmers want to help, and I agree with you. I think it's simply, if they understand what it is they need to do, they're willing to do it. And I remember the old days, Sam, you probably do too, that superphosphate. I remember watching my father carry a 50-pound bag of white superphosphate and throw it by the handsfuls into the gutter at the end of milking, up one side and down the other, and then we could go into the house. And he did that because the Extension Service told him that was the right thing to do.
Right.
He probably single-handedly put thousands of pounds of superphosphate.
You can't grow 14-foot corn, the crops that they grow, without the fertilizer that they put on the fields. Unfortunately, the ground is recently tilled, and you get the sediment that runs off, and again, the phosphorus is coming into the lake. But that's where the money should be spent, and I'm glad to see that they are. And maybe they've got to speed it up or get their stuff together to get it done. But I think that's where I would like to see it spent, working with the farmers and stopping the runoff that's coming out of those fields. So I'm glad to hear that.
Before we let you go, we did have our St. Albans police chief in here almost a month ago now, and he detailed for us a history of reduction in benefits that the state offered municipalities to help curb drug use with drug enforcement. I don't have his report in front of me, but he's looking to start something locally because of a pattern of reducing, available resources. And I was just wondering if it would be possible to maybe look at that and see. I mean, I see the governor and the state have invested in St. Albans for drug treatment, and that's fantastic. That'll have a great impact on our community, but we also have to look at how we can enforce our laws on dealers.
You're talking about Gary Taylor?
Yes.
Okay. We usually have him up at one of our meetings. See, the delegation meets twice a month, once here in Franklin County and once in Montpelier. So at one of the ones in Montpelier, we usually have Gary and Bob Norris come down.
Yep.
And then whoever else they want to bring. We could mention that to Kathy again and make sure that happens. Do you think, Corey?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I haven't seen the report you're talking about, but I do know, over the years, money shifted. We've taken the approach as a state from the law enforcement piece of drugs more towards the treatment. And, in the last year, I don't remember what month the governor came out, but we effectively eliminated all the wait time for Vermonters to get treatment and seek help for opiates. But it's definitely a big issue. It's a national issue now. You're starting to see the federal government get involved, so I wouldn't be surprised. While federal dollars are drying up in some places, the president has been clear and Congress has been clear, because it's not just Vermont. 6-7 years ago, it was, why is this happening in Vermont? It's a nationwide trend, and so hopefully there'll be more resources there. I'll recommend, I don't have any paperwork, but I can get some from the representatives from Rutland, but I know Rutland City has done a really good program with local communities coming together. I don't know if they're getting any state resources for it, but on combating and educating around opiate addiction and drugs. So I think that'd be a neat project, at least to bring to your attention and make sure that, I think it's an issue we all understand wholeheartedly here, and
Right.
don't want to see dollars come away from it.
Treatment's important, but enforcing
No, I totally get it.
laws and
It's-
penalties.
Take care of those who need it, and then go after the bad guys who are bringing it in.
Right, and it's, make sure.
It's that competition for funds in everything. There's so many priorities of things that have to be done and have to be done well, but then there's also the limitation on the amount of money that we have. And one of the things that we perhaps have not done as good a job as we should have is prioritizing where we spend. And it may be that there's some things that the state needs to stop doing or not doing quite as well, because there are more important things, such as dealing with the addiction issue, that we need to prioritize better.
That's an economic, it cripples our economy all the way around too. And it's a new addiction support center is, I believe, is fully up and running and doing its job really well. But I think we all share an idea that we'd like to see as much support from the state as we possibly could on trying to force folks who deal drugs to other areas, hopefully other states even. But
Anything else?
I don't know if anyone in the public had any questions.
Or can you go over that carbon tax just briefly?
So the proposal out is, the gist of the current plan, the Essex plan, is to ramp up a tax on fossil fuels. So that's natural gas, home heating fuel, gasoline for your car, and use the credits, the hundreds of millions of dollars that'll raise, to offset on electrical, to offset your electric bill, if you will. I don't buy into the math yet. They only met with them for a half hour, but they're trying to, it's a plan that's been around for a while that a couple years ago folks were saying was just a boogeyman election year thing that wasn't a real issue, but it's clear that, the Vermont Business for Social Responsibility has been pushing it, and a few other of those businesses. So they're looking probably not to get a vote on it this year, but they're starting to lay the groundwork in a proposal, and they're calling it revenue neutral. So you're going to pay more at the pump, but less at your electric bill. But I know I buy a lot more gas than I do electricity, so I'm probably going to pay more than I get for savings in the long run. And I try pushing back on them because you guys have the same constituents I do, and I know what makes St. Albans such a great place to do business in our industrial park is the fact that we have natural gas. And if they're going to tax that natural gas, I know that hurts some of the companies in the park, and they're high natural gas utilization companies, and I don't think those will be offset with their electrical carbon usage. But we'll hear them out and see what they're going to have to say. You know, I don't think it would have the votes to pass the House, but crazier things have passed that House. So,
Well, somebody should do
If you believe that we're going to collect all of that money and then redistribute it through some mechanism so that it goes back to the poor and rural people without any cost associated with this transfer, that's nuts. It's not free. There's going to be a cost. There's always a cost with plans and programs like this. And when we start looking at just not only the practical, but how are we doing our electricity right now? Well, this is a little app that shows where our power is coming from in New England from the ISO grid. And right now, we're getting 32% of our power from hydro, 21% from nuclear. We closed Vermont Yankee, and so as a result, we don't have any generated nuclear power in Vermont. We buy it from New Hampshire. We buy nuclear power. So 21% of that today is coming from there. 29% of it is coming from natural gas, and only 7%, despite this huge investment of renewables, only 7% is coming from renewables as of the moment we speak, and most of the time it's less than that.
no, Hydro-Quebec's our biggest, buyer. This is probably the smartest thing the state government's done in a while, and that was back in the 80s, was the contracts we entered into with Hydro-Quebec. And my committee's been up to Quebec, and I had to miss the trip, but some of them went up to northern Quebec this year to see some of the energy generation plants up there. But
When you look at the carbon tax, you have low-income Vermonters that have cars to get to and from work, that buy a lot of gas, that might pay, $950 a month for rent for a two-bedroom in St. Albans city or town with everything included. If their landlord, if everything went to plan with this Essex plan, their energy generation in their house for electricity could drop by $50 a month in cost. They're not going to see that in their rent. So it's not revenue neutral, and I'm glad that you recognize it, and I look forward to watching you fight it.
I joked with the folks when they came in to pitch it to me. As a St. Albans kid who went to BFA, anything named Essex is not something I'm going to support. So I told them that they had a bad name from the
Rename
beginning.
that.
now you have to reach across the aisle a little bit. Somebody really has to do an honest economic evaluation and get the social program to the side. Many things are laudable, but there is a very, very high price that's paid, and it's not always obvious how it's being paid.
Well, and the problem is we're such a small state. If we were to go it alone on something like that, it would cripple our economy, whereas if it happens nationwide or something, at least, you're not seeing the dollars funnel out of Vermont to New Hampshire, to New York, or a state that might not be doing it. We see it. The paper mill in Sheldon's had our delegation up there and talk about, I think that's the most efficient paper mill, one of the most efficient paper mills in the world. I forgot what designation they have, but they can't do anymore. In between the efficiency Vermont charges and what this would tag on, they just, they wouldn't be competitive with their plants in Texas. And
They shouldn't be in business in Vermont.
we need them to be, but they definitely pay more to do business here.
Any other questions from the audience?
I was just going to say this tax is just another nice way of getting the money back, because I belong to the tax committee, and we just talked with legislature not too long ago, and the consumption of gas has gone down in the last few years, so maintenance on your roads aren't getting done. So it's a catch-22, because you want commuter busing to transport people to have less pollution. But that's taken away from people running their vehicles, so they're not selling the gas as much. So, and then on top of it, you get your electric cars, which those people are getting tax breaks, and they're not paying for electricity, because a lot of the companies are giving them free electricity. So you guys got your hands full, because somewhere along the line it looks like this tax is just a fancy way to get some money into the budget to take care of the roads that they're losing on the other end from not selling as much gas.
It's a big internal income redistribution.
It is. And just one other thing, as far as the salt issue, it's just a wording problem in the state contract. I did look into it, and that gave the bidders an option to get away from the towns. The situation I had was being with the town, putting the bids in. The state came to all of us towns asking how much tonnage we were going to use. And the problem I got is that the state used our tonnage to get a better price, and then we didn't get the benefits of it.
Did they thank you? Did they
This
send you?
much.
Did they
It's the
thank
price
you?
for this much ended up
Yeah.
buying this much,
That's
and
why.
then you guys are all.
We
paying.
don't have any
Did
idea.
they thank you for your help?
So, but it's just, as Bill had said in the contract, if the state would just change the wording a little bit, then they'd have to benefit the town. But that's all it is. And I think it's in section 10 of the agreement.
Who came to you and asked you how much salt you needed?
It was an email from the state. I could look
Our
up the
district,
email.
Jim Cota is our district, I think, engineers is,
Yeah,
often
but
does
this
it,
came
but,
right from Montpelier.
I mean, they do every year. But we can give you that name if you like.
Came from
Hands on
Mecca.
it. Can you forward it to me?
Yeah.
My legislative address.
And I'll talk to the House members on House Transportation from Franklin County. We have Brian Savage and Barbara
Oh, is he?
Murphy.
Yep.
I think there's a chance Randy could end up on transportation. I know that's one of the seats Dustin's vacated was a seat on transportation in the morning, so I don't know if they're reshuffling other committees, but
Yeah, maybe.
that could be a potential. So
That'd be
Good.
fantastic.
All right, thanks.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Switch off to something else. The notary bill that passed the House last year, and I understand it's coming to the Senate. I have no clue what any mid-session committees have discussed about it, where the Secretary of State wants to take over all the notaries from the state. It's been in the county domain since it started. The county clerks are in favor of keeping it. The county administrators, the assistant judges are in favor of keeping it, but we're being boxed out by the Secretary of State. Have you had any discussions yet on where it stands at the Senate level?
I haven't.
I don't know anything about it. I don't know why the Secretary of State would want it, frankly.
Because there's fees that are associated with it, income. Right now, it's split between the counties and the state. Under the proposal that was passed last year, it would be then split 3 ways, with the largest share going to the Secretary of State's office. I don't know where that stands right now, whether it could be met this summer. But I would like to see before if it does see the light of day again in your committees and it comes up, what are the benefits to the public at large? Because as I read the bill, it takes the control of the notaries away from the counties, and people have to apply online and do everything with the Secretary of State's office. There will be no more coming into the county offices, getting their notaries. They're going to change it from a 4-year to a 2-year, and over the course of the next 5 years, they're going to double the cost for getting that, and the requirements associated with being a notary. You're going to have a stamp, you're going to have to keep records, you're going to have to do remedial training every year. All of these things to make it more quote-unquote professional, but what it's going to do is it's going to curtail a lot of us having access to a notary. Because if it gets more expensive and more time-consuming for people to be notaries, there will be less notaries, and those that are left will start charging people.
Sure.
And, that may work in Philadelphia, New York City or whatnot, but in the local communities, I think it's a disservice.
I'm glad you raised that issue because I haven't heard anything about it. But I
And
will.
presumably it would
Fine.
go to the Senate Gov Ops Committee.
And I think that's where it's been referred to.
Yeah.
If it comes down to the floor, I'd be happy to come down and speak. I'm the vice president of our association of assistant judges. I'd love to come down and talk and answer any questions anyone might have. Why I think it should stay at the county.
No, I think that should be at the committee level before it gets on the floor.
Okay.
If it's, and so what we can do is look out for the bill and then track when testimony is, assuming testimony is going to be taken on the bill, when, and see that you get invited.
Well, it went through the House as H206.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's been assigned any other number at the Senate level.
Yeah, we'll take a
That
look.
would be Jeanette White.
Yep. Yeah, I know.
Mr. Chair.
I used to be on that committee a few years ago.
Thank you.
What was the number again, Bob?
H206.
H206.
I think we're done.
Thank you very much, Corey, Randy, Carolyn.
Thank you for
Sounds like it
coming
worked.
in.
Have a great year, folks.
I think the next thing we have on our agenda is the town manager's report.
Right, so I didn't add anything new, so this should be fairly quick. First item is the personnel policy update. The changes that being proposed are on page 4 of the policy. And what we were attempting to do is clarify what permanent part-time employees would qualify for as far as benefits. So we added 2 paragraphs, and it's fairly easy to understand on page 4 what we have, what we propose to strike and what we're proposing to add. This is the first time you've seen it, so fire away at questions or edits.
Hi.
Well, I think the changes make a lot of sense. And
Okay.
and they're pretty clear, so I'm happy with it.
Wow, excellent.
That's a change,
I
right?
know.
Right.
Yep.
To pause for a moment. No, thank you. Any other comments?
Oh, yeah, it's,
Well, if there's no other comments, I'll take a motion to approve the change to the personnel policy.
So moved.
We're not bothering
All
you, are
those
we,
in
Jen?
favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes.
Thank you.
Can we just sign it?
Wait,
I think Bruce wanted us to stop.
no, they're having trouble hearing the audience speak, but you can hear the board fine.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Just so you know. that
Thank
was-
you.
They don't have a mic,
That's also a
Poor
first.
first,
people.
right?
How things have changed,
Poor
Bob.
people.
Okay,
Shocking.
next
Perfect.
item on the agenda is the St. Albans Health Plan status.
So Alan is here and actually just referenced the Regional Planning's Transportation Advisory Committee, or what we call TAC Committee. He's planning to go to them next week, I guess it is, to talk about the path, answer questions, and show the committee our proposal. And also Ned, as I said in our notes, has had some really good conversations with the V-Trans guy as far as bike and ped paths go. And also Ned is signed up for I forget exactly what it was called, but it's a free webinar about pedestrian treatments in rural settings. So it seemed to be made for this project. So he's going to be doing that in the next 2 weeks as well. So we're slowly making progress on that project. The last item was just you were copied on the Act 250 documents that St. Albans Glass is moving. Many people already know this, but they're moving to our Franklin Park Industrial, or Franklin West.
Franklin Park West, yeah.
Franklin Park West Industrial Park. So this is just a notice to the select board with a location map, pretty basic. And that is it for my report.
Any questions on the town manager's report? Not, we'll move into public comment. Do you have any public comment tonight?
I'm here if you have any questions about the county budget for the upcoming year.
Why is it so high? Come on.
Can you cut it?
Well, it's actually, the budget for next year is actually a couple $1,000s less than this year's budget.
Wow.
Now, where's the butt?
Well, through the discussions with the sheriff's department, which is the largest cost center in our budget, we have flatlined his budget for this coming year. We moved around some stuff internally into courthouse. We moved some money into capital improvements because we've got to start addressing an elevator shaft for the courthouse up on Church Street.
Oh, really, that's good.
So we've done our best to keep all of our costs down low, and right now it's looking like we're going to go up down about $6,000 over the year. I just got the equalization numbers today, the equalized grand list. Not the final numbers, but it shows the town's portion is actually going to go down because with the new grand list, the town is going to be providing 18% of the county budget, whereas in last year it was 18.2%. So, which is a significant decrease for the town. The town pays the lion's share of the county budget right now. The city is going up the difference that we're going down. They're paying 0.2% more of the budget. because of their growth versus the fact
Yeah.
that they were so much lower than us to begin with.
We're happy to see the city grand list increase dramatically. We're looking forward to that.
As a county administrator, so am I. But if you have any specific questions other than why it's up, well, it's not up, but we try our best every year to keep it flatlined or at least responsible for the citizens that pay it.
Great job, I would say.
Thank you.
Very good.
Any other public comment? If not, we'll talk about the schedule. The next meeting's on Tuesday, January 16th, and Monday, February 5th. We'll be having a budget meeting on Monday, January 8th at 5:30.
Excuse me.
Any questions on the schedule? Any other business?
I have one thing to get up on a soapbox about for a brief second.
Sure, go ahead.
The
Get up there.
timer.
Well, 3 minutes, right? No.
Yeah.
I spend a decent amount of time doing some marketing on social media, and in my social media travels, I noticed this past weekend a lot of folks have been circulating petitions to enact ordinances or policies at municipal level to make it illegal to have animals outside during inclement weather. I clicked on the petition thinking it'd be a great idea, and as why would a town in Vermont not already have that protection? But those petitions were all for townships in New York, so I don't know how many people read them before they signed them. But I read our animal control ordinance, and it's very clear that animals in our town have to be given safe and adequate shelter, and that would, in my mind, this inclement weather, definitely being outside is not adequate shelter at this point. I know there are outdoor cats and hunting dogs that are outside, so if anybody signed a petition or noticed that or has seen a neighbor or somebody in the area in our town maybe neglecting an animal or leaving an animal outside and you're concerned about its well-being, I would say contact Town Hall. We'd be happy to maybe have our animal control officer investigate it and make sure that our four-legged friends are safe. And if they're not safe, we will make sure that they are safe before they freeze. So.
The animal control information is on our website too, because obviously if you call after hours, the town hall offices are closed after 4 and before 8.
We have, do we have David's cell phone? If anybody's at home and thinking, oh yeah, my neighbor, Dave McWilliams is a great ACO, and yeah.
His, and he's on call a lot, but that doesn't mean he's on call every second of every day. He will return phone calls, but his number is 802-393-7252, and he will investigate concerns in the town.
Right. So we are covered. You don't need to sign any petitions if you live in St. Albans town.
Oh, and clarify that I've seen some commercials on television too that just say Franklin County, but they're New York. I saw some commercials about the shelter, and I knew it wasn't our shelter. That's it, I think.
Any other business?
I'm good.
With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, so moved.
All those in favor say aye.
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 You're adjourned.
Yes.